right, thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the Telling and Selling the Story of St. Louis panel. I'm Alfred Jackson. Moved to St. Louis in 2018 for Venture for America, worked at Archbridge for a while, and then moved out of St. Louis for about a year to work in venture capital. That was a really bad decision. Moved back to St. Louis, and now I'm back and just happy to be on this panel today. So I would like for all of our panelists to just kind of introduce themselves and then we can kind of get into the conversation. So Jess, first start.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jess Bellomo. I am a native St. Louisan, well, originally from the sticks of St. Charles. I've lived in St. Louis since I was 18, though, so it's been a minute. I started my career doing international diplomacy work in a nonprofit space for the World Affairs Council. Did that for 10 years, bringing in international visitors to St. Louis, and then 5 years traveling, doing a lot of planning events around the country, but not much here, which also was a mistake. Glad to come back and be back in St. Louis and be a St. Louisan, and have been working for Arch Grants for a little over a year now, and I am in charge of all things to do with the startup competition, including getting people interested in coming to St. Louis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Larry Morris. St. Louis native, grew up in the University City area, went to school here pretty much from the soil through and through. Started in education, elementary, which led me to middle school, which led me to university work as an assistant director of the Multicultural Center. And now it has me at the Kransberg Arts Foundation. I've always been in the arts community. I'm in a hip hop band that's been around for 20 years. We've been all over the United States. And because of the work that I was doing supporting musicians and people in the arts community, I caught the attention of Chris Hansen over at the Kransberg Arts Foundation, who made me in charge of the artist residency and artist advocacy in the local community. And I work with him on the Music at the Intersection Festival and aggregating data and trying to figure out how to build a better music infrastructure in the St. Louis area. So that's my story.
Which was amazing, by the way, this year. Thank you very much. My name is Maggie Crane. I've been in communications, really, my whole career. I started out coming back to St. Louis, so boomeranged back. That was smart. And to work at KMOV. I was at KMOV for about 4 years, and then Mayor Francis Slay's office called. And that wound up being actually the best job I never knew that I wanted, was working for Mayor Slay for the last 4.5 years of his administration. Now I'm at BioSTL, been there for the past 5 years. BioSTL, for those of you who don't know, really has its fingerprints on everything in the innovation and startup ecosystem. It started 20 years ago to build what we have today. So it's been really fun to watch it grow and to see it continue, and as we keep growing our own companies right here in St. Louis.
Hi, my name is Anthony Bartlett. I'm the founder and president of a company called Acclimate, which some people may remember as STL Transplants. During the pandemic, we decided to get out of the organ and limb business. We're a boutique relocation company. So essentially, we found a gap in the relocation market, which was anybody who was moving, say, from the coast or had never been west of Pennsylvania or had never left California, really had no idea how to move to a middle market or a smaller city. And so cities that weren't necessarily on everybody's bucket list, that is what we do. So for people who are coming from, say, San Francisco, Houston, LA, New York, or internationally, we are hired by their employer, so we're a B2B business, to help attract that talent and kind of help them get on the plane. So we're working with people who aren't quite here yet, and then we're helping them settle in. So we're not finding their real estate or their housing, we're doing their culture, their community, their friendships, their restaurants, basically anything that will help them, schools, congregations, anything that will help them feel at home in St. Louis. So it's kind of, we tell companies it's who do you want to get and then who do you want to keep.
So as you can see, we have an amazing group of folks that can kind of talk to multiple parts of what it looks like to kind of sell St. Louis to multiple different kind of interest groups and types of people. But I think the first question that I would like to ask everybody on the panel, but also open it up to the crowd, is just, what makes you optimistic about St. Louis, its economy, and where it's headed?
I'm excited about St. Louis and the economy, where it's heading, because of the startups in St. Louis. You take Benson Hill, some of these might be like names that you may have heard of. You all are familiar with startups, so you're probably a little bit more intimately familiar. But we recruited Benson Hill to St. Louis from North Carolina when it was just two guys working on a lab bench, trying to develop better proteins in plants to feed the plant-based meat market. And twice, they nearly closed up shop because they were down to their last nickel. All startups can understand that one, right? Like, this might be it. This might be where I have to cut bait. And BioGenerator, the startup and investment arm of BioSTL, said, no, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. We really believe in you. Paid to keep the lights on, paid the CEO's salary because they really believed in them. They went public on the New York Stock Exchange on October 5th of last year. They're valued at $1.35 billion with a B dollars. That's nothing to shake a stick at. We had another company called Covercress, also started at BioGenerator, where they developed this cover crop. So it's planted between corn and soybean season, and it gives farmers another revenue stream, both in ag feed and oil. Well, Bunge and Bayer just took majority stake in that company, which is considered a huge, strong exit. So those are the types of things where we're seeing, where we're doing a really good job of growing our own and really supporting startups from the ground up. Yes, some we're recruiting in to grow here, much like Arch Grants is doing as well. And other things, it's like, you got an idea? Lay it on me. What you got? We're gonna give you that entire support that you need to thrive, that you need to give this your best shot. So to me, I think just in my little hovel of the world, that's what I'm seeing. That makes me excited is that we are doing a very noble job of really truly growing our own and also then attracting businesses globally to St. Louis. The benefit there is they haven't always even heard about us. So we kind of have a blank slate, a blank canvas to paint for how to get them here. And we have a heck of a story to tell. Some other headlines that you know very well just often get in the way.
Okay, I'll go. So yeah, and Larry and I were actually just talking about this a little bit ago about like somebody years ago told me like if you want to understand like how well an economy or city is growing or not, then look at how many cranes are in the sky. And like my job before this, like I said, had me going all over the country, and I saw cranes in the air in places like Nashville and Denver, and I'd come home and there was like bupkis. And that's really changed. Like now, like I think like this is the only view that I've seen recently where there weren't multiple cranes in the air. And it's not just like one little neighborhood, and it's not like, like when I was first starting my career and living and working downtown in 2007-8, and I saw a hyper focus on like just doing high-rise lofts and like no focus on infrastructure beyond that, and then the economy crashed and everything just shut down. That's not what I'm seeing this time. I'm seeing actual infrastructure, like actual thoughtfulness. Like we need more than just a shopping center here. We need more than just high rent housing here. We need all of the pieces, all of the things. And I'm seeing that now in a way that I have never seen in my life, which I think is really promising and makes it a lot easier to sell St. Louis than it used to be when I started my career 15 or so years ago. So yeah, I would definitely say we should be optimistic. We have reason to be optimistic right now. That's my opinion.
I guess I'll jump in. For me, working on the cultural side, the one thing I've always loved about St. Louis is that we've always believed that our culture should be accessible for people across the board. And what I love about where we're at as a city right now is more and more people are moving out of silos and thinking about what that looks like to be inclusive across the board. Working for a foundation that's near the historic, unfortunately, Delmar Divide, there's a lot of conversations in our ecosystem about how do we create access to arts and music and culture to people who traditionally wouldn't walk 100 feet to be a part of these things. So I think that's a really big thing that I'm seeing in St. Louis is that we're really thinking about what it means to do that and also building the infrastructure that retains our artists. It's pretty cool that we have a few world-class artists, for example, Damon Davis, who just erected the monument in front of St. Louis City, which is a nod to Mill Creek. He's in St. Louis. He lives here. He's decided to make this his home base. We have a lot of musical artists and whatnot who are deciding that they want to stay here, and they're seeing past, as you were already alluding to, the perception of it not being safe and whatnot, and really deciding to really lay roots here, and which ties into education, giving back to the community and making sure that the next generation knows that these gifts that are bestowed, because it's a lot of money that's floating in the arts world, or going to the next generation. So for me, that makes me hopeful, and it drives my passion to continue doing this work, because I mean, I don't know many cities where you can go to world-class museums and be a part of world-class things, and it's not an arm and a leg, or it's free, you know? And so I think that's something that's been instilled in our culture that's very strong, that I strongly support.
For me, the word would be impact. I could have done what I did in D.C., where I spent a number of years, and D.C. did not need me. It did not need help to grow. Austin doesn't need it. Denver, 300 people moving a day, doesn't need it. Nashville doesn't need it. So, yeah, I do think St. Louis has a lot of room for improvement, but I kind of wanted to be a part of that. And so a lot of people, when you're thinking about starting a business or you're recruiting talent, this is something that we say quite a bit. It's if you want to move to a city that's already arrived, I totally understand that. You know, people have fought hard their whole lives and don't want to necessarily be a change maker or, be whatever it is that they're trying to do or they're endeavoring to do while they study or grow a business, and I totally get that. But if you want to see the ripple effect of what you do, if you want to be somewhere where you are not a number, where you are needed, St. Louis isn't yet saturated. It has not had its pop yet. So there are certain talent and certain people and executives who are going to be invigorated by that, and certain people who want to be a very small fish in a giant pond that's already made it. So, when Amazon and other companies were looking around, I said, St. Louis was the one city that 100,000 people wouldn't ruin. You have to think about what people in San Diego and Dallas and Nashville and Atlanta and virtually almost anywhere, what they're dealing with logistically. Your entire day is figuring out how to commute and how to get around, and just in St. Louis, as an entrepreneur, I had 4 extra hours a day, not on the road and just running my errands and doing shopping and getting my licenses and whatever it might be that we have. So I do think the big part of it is more just getting them here. But St. Louis has a lot of things. It has the sunlight that not a lot of people know. It's above the hurricanes. It's below the ice. We have more water than any city in the world. I don't know that people really understand that. If you're in Denver or California, you have no idea what businesses go through with water every day. And we have nearly all of it. So there are a lot of few things logistically and operationally that St. Louis has that I think is a real opportunity, and it would be a way to be somewhere at the outset, which is interesting, at least for me, and might be interesting to some of the people that you're recruiting too. So.
And bringing it to the crowd, I don't want to put her on the spot, but I'm gonna do it. So, so we have here Jess, she's the director of VFA for St. Louis. Adventure for America is a fellowship.
Oh, sorry.
She's the director of VFA for St. Louis, and their whole thing is bringing recent college grads to go work for like local startups and venture capital firms or nonprofits in cities like St. Louis. So I would love to hear from your perspective, like when you're talking to people that are just coming out of college or like a year or two in their careers, like what do you tell them about St. Louis when you're talking to them?
Well, and so I'll piggyback off of what you said.
Yeah,
I am a transplant, so I'm not from St. Louis, and I absolutely love when people ask me where I went to high school because I think of Shores, and they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm from Alabama. But I tell people, I'm a transplant. I thought that this would be a first step in my career, and I would step somewhere else, and I never did. I stayed. And I have a career that spans across like 12 years in nonprofit, but like worked at Regional Arts Commission, so I know you very, really well. I tell people, I'm like, we are a
So, you know, the other question I would like to ask is just, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that St. Louis is dealing with or grappling with? And what do you see as opportunities to kind of, you know, get at those challenges to kind of make the city move forward in the right direction?
I'll go first, and I'm just gonna be candid because that's who I am. We do a terrible job of marketing ourselves. We let everybody dictate the narrative of this city, and it drives me wild. I have been to every major city, from Detroit to New York to LA, all the same problems we have. I've seen some crazy stuff in cities that I was like, I didn't think this was happening here like that. But you don't hear about it like that because they really own their image. And you know, I don't want to finger point or blame anybody because it can go multiple directions, but we as St. Louis have to own our image and let people know who we are. Yes, there's crime here. There's crime everywhere, okay? Yes, there are things that happen, but you know what? I go everywhere. I have never really felt like I was in grave danger. And most of the friends I bring here that I take around, because a small thing about me, everybody that comes to St. Louis, they always want the Chinese food when they get here. So we visit to the spots where you can get the good stuff. We go. And they've never was like, I feel like we're gonna get mugged or robbed. And I just think St. Louis has to do a stronger job. And I know Tashara and them are thinking about these things, 100% Neil Richardson, they're great people, they're thinking about these. But we have to own our image, and we have to talk about more than just our zoo and more than just, you know, the World's Fair. It's great. It happened. Dr. Pepper and hot dogs. That's cool. But like, we're in 2022 going into 2023. What is St. Louis now? So that's my thoughts on what we really, that's one piece of the puzzle, at least in my mind.
You've got the mic.
Okay. Yes to all of that, absolutely. I know something else we were talking about recently. We should have just recorded our conversation, I guess, and had that be the show. But yeah, we were talking about, like, was it 30 years is like the lag time between like what's actually happening and the perception of that thing being fixed, going away. So I definitely think we have a lot of legacy issues, and not to say like we got it all fixed and it's all lies if somebody says that there's still problems here. Like, no, I would never say that. We have a lot of problems still that we need to face and be real about. But yeah, I definitely think that some of our older reputations are still dictating our narrative, and we're, like Larry said, we're letting that ride instead of, you know, like building our own narrative. So yeah, I think that with a concerted effort, that can start to, you know, dissolve, but it's going to take a lot of actively like navigating that. So.
We have, I mean, I've been here for a year. I'm from Denver, and I lived in Miami. I lived in DC before it became what it is now, and there's crime everywhere. Do we have a visitors bureau here? Yes.
We do.
Yeah.
Was that your question?
I was gonna speak kind of
Where
to.
are they?
Well, they're in the wrong place, and I can say because that was my first job out of college, and I just there's so much here, and there's so much that needs to be talked about, and I love everything that you guys have been saying. I will say this: number one detriment to St. Louis, from my perspective, is the state of Missouri that is trapped. There are, I mean, let's just face it: it's just not going to be competitive with its cities, as long as people associate where we are with Josh Hawley and Eric Schmidt and the first state to outlaw abortion across the board. I mean, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. It is a horrible detriment to the city's potential because, you know, it plays right into the stereotypes. Now, that said, St. Louis is uniquely, I guess, screwed because it happens to be one of the bluest cities in the country, trapped in a, you know,
Very red
a
state.
state that's getting redder all the time. And that dichotomy presents all kinds of challenges. And when you're trying to sell the city and you know, basically eliminate stigmas and stereotypes, that's a really challenging thing to do. So what I would say is that anyone who is going to think St. Louis is nothing but crime, because I see it in the news, and crime and riots and this and that. That's not the kind of demographic we should be going after. Anyone who summarizes a city and bases their their judgment off a headline is not the kind, we have enough ignorant bullshit to deal with. We don't need people who are surface level seekers. We need people who are going to see beyond the headlines, dig a little deeper, get to understand the city. This is a very old city. You know, places like Austin and Nashville, they're also trapped in deeply red states. The difference is nobody in those cities is from those cities. And that is another thing. I'm all over the place with this point.
We follow you.
Yeah, these are all great points, yeah.
I cringe every time someone says, oh, St. Louis is a little big city or a big small town. That's so stupid, and that doesn't sell the city. It doesn't make it sound cool. It sounds stupid. It sounds nice for like a church group or like ladies who make quotes or something. But I mean, like if you're looking for like the excitement of a city or an urban center, St. Louis, that is what we should be selling. We have been, you know, from 1850 to 1960, St. Louis was one of the top 10 largest cities in the country. To this day, it's still a larger market than Austin. Still more people here than Nashville and Charlotte and all these hot cities you keep reading about. That will not be the case in the next census, I'm sure, but it's the case right now. And so when you're in a city when it doesn't get a lot of transplants, everybody's co-mingling with the same people they saw at the last event, it does start to feel small.
Yeah.
But when you go to a city, even if it's smaller and everyone is new, every face is different, they come from somewhere else, it kind of feels bigger, even if it's not.
Right.
And I think that's something that St. Louisans need to rewire our own civic self-esteem and realize we have been around the block. We are not some startup city out of nowhere. We've been a big city since we were founded, an important city. And with that comes all the layers and baggage, good and bad, of a major city that with you know, the luxury or detriment of age, many layers of age, generational baggage. So I don't know, I feel like sometimes we're so focused on attracting other people to the city that we forget that the most important, you know, audience is really to get St. Louisans and especially suburban St. Louisans to realize what we have here and understand it. Even if it's not a city for everybody, at least you can appreciate it and understand what it has to offer. And therefore, we become the best ambassadors to sell that to the masses. But we have to believe it ourselves first. And I think that's where the challenge starts. To answer yours about the CVB, the Convention Bureau, Explore St. Louis is what it's known as. This is my biggest criticism, right? Exactly what Larry was saying. They just sent a delegation to New York to try to pitch St. Louis. And come to St. Louis for all these New York firms and creatives and companies looking to expand. And I respect everybody that they sent there, and I respect the effort that went into the presentation. But I watched it and I'm sitting there thinking, is this really the best we could do, especially to a New York audience? I mean, they're flying over the Art Museum and the Keener Plaza and Busch Stadium. What city doesn't do that? What city doesn't have those things to brag about? They all do, and they all say the same thing. And they all have their local celebrities who have moved to other cities to try to sell them up, people on their hometowns. Nobody's going to Cleveland because Drew Carey says to come to Cleveland. Same thing here. It's like it's a worthy effort. I get it looks cool. That John Goodman's from St. Louis, yeah.
He lives in New Orleans.
He lives in New Orleans. And I just really feel like it's what every city points to these, you know, these high-dollar, high-brow attractions and museums and airports, convention centers. These tangible things that every city has, and they all say the same thing. Where St. Louis shines and where the distinction is the connective tissue, the cultural components that no city, you know, very few cities can match it pound for pound.
Yeah.
And it's something that comes with age and a long legacy of being a big important city in previous generations. And I think that's something our architecture, the historic neighborhoods, the relative affordability of these incredible neighborhoods, where you don't have to sacrifice a big city experience. You don't have to compete, you know, with a million other people moving there just to consume. So, sorry, this is long-winded, I can go on and on. There's so many
That's
unpacked
great.
here.
I think you
But
covered
have
all
to
the points.
face Missouri. We have to face the state of Missouri. That is, we will never achieve.
And it's
our-
real. We almost lost a startup coming here because of the abortion ban.
And
I mean,
how
it's
many
real,
will
it's
we never
tangible.
hear from?
Right.
Who may be looking.
Well, and
we're
that's
not even
something
on the
too,
list.
that we find out that we often find that we're not even on someone's list. So when we're talking about, attracting the big companies, we're not even on their list. KWS, which is this giant seed company, it's like the world's 4th largest seed company. So obviously, big dog, doing big things. We weren't even on their list. And now their North American headquarters is in St. Louis. Because someone, in a very St. Louis way, someone knew someone who knew someone, and they got us on the list. And then when we get them here, they go, wow, how is this place not on our list? Well, someone was looking at a bunch of headlines and looking at crime indices and went, ooh, we shouldn't pitch that one. When we get people here, we can better sell St. Louis because we can introduce them and give them a taste of that connectivity. But attracting talent is a real issue. Different types of talent, right? Like we've got different audiences too. To your point, yeah, a startup audience, someone who wants to, who isn't afraid of a little grit, a little effort into things. This is a great place to be. But when Centene is going, yep, just lost a senior vice president candidate because his wife got scared on the Metrolink. I mean, this is also an issue. It's kind of like one of those but ands, right? Like this is also an issue that we have. We do find that we show up better, we show up bigger when we can get them in the door. Come from Denver and Miami and Gulf Shores, come. And we often find that people will stay because they find connectivity here in St. Louis.
And it's small, and you can go to the hill, it takes
Yeah.
5 minutes, you can go downtown to the river, you can go, there's so many little pockets that you can get to without being in the traffic
And to jump in to what you were saying, and you brought up a good point towards the end of that wonderful sermon, because it was a good one. Randy and I are both from U City. Love U City.
Well, my dad's from U City.
Well, you close enough, association. But being from U City, I love my neighborhood, but I live in South City. And what I have to do is get people out of this fiefdom mindset that I live in Baldwin. That's not my problem. Yes, it is your problem. Community is community across. Unfortunately, that great divorce of 1876 has not played out well for this city.
Keeps haunting us.
It's haunting us, right? And I get it. We have our allegiances to where we grew up at, our loves for it and whatnot. But St. Louis is St. Louis to me at the end of the day. I might love where I'm from, but I'm a St. Louisan through and through. When I go out of town to other places, they might know of U City because of Nelly or something vaguely. But most people don't know. Like, oh, I'm from Creve Coeur. They're like, I don't know where that is. I'm from St. Louis. Oh, okay, I got you. So I think we also have to get out of that mindset of it's ridiculous when we have neighborhoods with 50 people in it and a mayor. It doesn't, I don't understand it, but it is, unfortunately it is what it is. So I also feel like we have to move past that and to your St. Louis, and we are all St. Louis, and what's good for one is good for all. I don't care how we break it down. We need kids to have education that's equal across the board. I need people to have access to the things that you see out in Chesterfield across the board. It's very important, so.
You go to Boston and you talk bad about Boston, they're like, I'll punch you in your mouth. You come to St. Louis and say something bad about St. Louis, and we're like, yeah, I know.
That's down there.
I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. We have like an entire attitude, or need an entire attitude adjustment.
Y'all are making this job really easy for me.
Right?
Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ken. All right, everyone's done their, hello? Testing, 1, 2, 3. I think you just also speak loudly too.
I think it's for the recording.
Oh, for the recording, sorry about that. The room has demonstrated a love of St. Louis. There's not anyone here who doesn't feel passionately about it. So I would like to pose a simple question to the panelists. If I were to give you a small canister of magical sprinkle dust, and you could change one thing for the betterment of St. Louis, what would it be?
My knee-jerk reaction to that question, which I've been asked before, is always the education system. Like to Larry's point, what he just said, I think a large part of the leveling of the playing field would come out of having a truly equitable, across-the-board education system where the city and Chesterfield have the same resource and the same access to the same types of educational offerings. I think that would go so far, and that is one thing that I'm not seeing a ton of traction with right now. Like I said, in the beginning, I'm seeing lots of traction in general. I'm not really seeing any answer to that question. I'm not a parent, so maybe if I were a parent in the city, I would know some things that I don't know, but I think that would be where I'd throw my magic fairy dust.
Yeah, I'm not looking for solutions. I just like topics. So education.
Education, that's my answer for you. Yeah.
Mine would be the balkanization and the political scenario of the separation of the city and the county, for sure. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about it, they're thinking about it locally from the perspective of who's going to pick up my trash. What are, I want the Creve Coeur ambulance to come pick me up, but they're not, I don't think a lot of residents, and this is both sides. I mean, this is an issue that, there are people in the city who are pro-separation, and there are people in Wildwood who are pro-separation for all of their own reasons. But they have no idea what St. Louis looks like from afar to somebody in London, in New York, in Sao Paulo, and that is what throws it on the list of among the most dangerous cities, not only in the country, but in the world. And so I pick up people at the airport every day who are confounded, who are utterly confused, going, I thought I was landing in Baghdad, and they would literally call home from the car and go, honey, I'm okay. And I thought they were just calling to say to their spouse or partner or loved one, I landed. No. They were really calling to say, I'm alive for the moment. This guy seems okay, but I will call you when we get to the hotel. And so, it's kind of like, I use the analogy of a restaurant with what do they call it? The health and safety guidelines. So would you eat at a restaurant that had an F on the front window? No matter what they told you they were serving inside. And so any politician, anybody, any civic group, anybody that is pretending to do something to grow the region without addressing the balkanization and the fact that, people who are looking at St. Louis, they don't look up metropolitan statistical area. They just Google St. Louis, and Google is the window. They're not, respectfully, Randy, I don't think that is their fault. That is our fault. That it is our fault that they don't know that. And we recruit researchers for a living. So they do go deep and they do look very carefully at it. But I think, St. Louis in a normal city might be, I don't know, maybe 8 neighborhoods in the whole county, and it's 89. So there's 89 mayors. That's 89, however many fire chiefs. That's however many, police chiefs. And I do think that if the people of St. Louis knew, if the employers really, really knew the jumbo jets of accredited investors that literally divert and go to Charlotte instead, that go to Columbus, Ohio instead, if they really truly understood the losses to the nonprofits, to the shoppers, to everything, all because of this weird statistical anomaly in the way we are set up, I think they would be going. I don't know. I don't know that they would come in from off the rooftops until something changed. And I do think that does impact the crime. I mean, 100,000 new people with great jobs would impact the schools, would impact city schools. That would impact, there's nothing like saturation. I'm not saying what Denver and DC and all these places and some of these cities haven't done some remarkable things, but, it's a little bit easy to transform, schools and neighborhoods and things like that when you have, 10,000 people move to your city a month who are all contributing. So that would be my fairy dust that I think would impact all those aspects.
I agree with him now because his solution would solve my problem too. So,
That was my thought, the whole too.
But I think that speaks to it, right? Is that is the root of all of the problems, from crime to education to fire and EMS service. It's broken up by districts, so not necessarily by these little cities, these little municipalities, but by districts. So and that's based off your tax rate. So if you're paying higher taxes, you're able to pay your fire and EMS, your paramedics and EMTs and firefighters more. So what kind of a talent are you going to attract? The best and the brightest go to where there is the least need. And that is happening every day. So when you've got, some really great fire districts up in Spanish Lake and Blackjack, they can't afford the same as West County EMS and fire can. So those fire paramedics with this great talent, they say, well, I can do the same exact work safer and make more money if I go over here instead of here. That is so messed up. That is a problem that we have got to fix. Otherwise, talk about an equity issue. That to me just screams equity issues. And just, fire and EMS, when you call 911, who shows up? So you're getting the best and the brightest going west because they pay more in property tax. Instead, if you had one uniform district like LA, FD, you would have the best fire captains where the greatest need was, rather than, well, that's all we could afford.
As an example in the disparity, I worked in the Clayton School District and I worked in the St. Louis Public School District. And it was complete night and day. They opened a new library for the elementary school I worked in, and at the time my kid was not in St. Louis. So the parents, we're gonna buy furniture, and they drove up to Chicago on their own dime and bought furniture to furnish a whole library. Never seen nothing like that in my life. Or seeing mothers who have nannies watch the kids while the mothers are in the corner having a conversation. Meanwhile, I go to the St. Louis Public School District, and that lunch might have been the only meal some of those kids had that day. Or they didn't have any coloring books or anything like that. So I'm going back to Clayton, give me everything I ain't using because I'm taking it to the city. And thank God the teachers were really cool. They were absolutely, that's the right thing to do. But we shouldn't live in the St. Louis like that, where your neighborhood determines the level of education a child gets. So to bring it back to the root, like you said, the division of county, city, and all these municipalities, it's a mess. And I've heard stories about companies like Google Fiber was supposed to come to St. Louis, and they saw it was all broken up, and they said, we'll go to Kansas City, and they left. So
True story. Yeah. I was working for SLAY when this happened, and it was, if you talk to Dave Peacock, who has been everywhere, and when he was working for Schnucks Markets, he'd be like, oh, well, in Webster Groves, so I'm trying to plan truck routes. And in Webster Groves, I can deliver on this side of the street until 10 p.m. But on that side of the street that's Kirkwood, I can only deliver until 8 p.m. So then I have to, oh, hell. Real problems. And so, with Google Fiber, it's it's not just one or two municipalities that I have to go through. It's 89, and I have to have permits from 89 different municipalities. They said, bye. What else are we losing out on because of it?
Randy had a comment?
I agree. I think the city-county division is
Oh, he grabbed the mic.
the root that exacerbates all other problems in metropolitan areas. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were
You say good things. It needs to be recorded.
Yes.
okay. But I don't know where the solution is to that. I know there have been efforts for decades to try to reunite the city and the county. What I think a lot of it a lot could help if we had an emotional, psychological shift. Even if we can't control all the political divisions and fragmentation of all these suburbs that are vying for tax base or whatever, that we can at least collectively recognize a few, very obvious points. Number one, you can't have a suburb of nowhere. The emphasis needs to be on building up the central core of the city. St. Louis City needs to be the focal point and the hub of the region no matter what. Because without a strong city, you've got weak suburbs that punch under their weight too. And that's a pretty that's a very challenging thing to convince people who live in the suburbs, and it's out of sight, out of mind. Oh, we see someone got shot on their way to a Cardinals game. That's what they think of the city, and so they don't feel invested in its health, its overall viability. That's a problem. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that every major metropolitan area has fragmentation. Every major metropolitan area has suburbs that are fighting with each other or have different ordinances and laws or regulations or tax requirements.
But they
things
might be
like
under
that.
one county.
They do. Yeah, they do. But I mean, they do and they don't. I feel like, you know, just the city-county thing, it's a problem in St. Louis, but it can also be a red herring, and we could also use it as a crutch. There are plenty of places that have independent city-county government functions. San Francisco City, San Francisco County.
I think LA is the
Slightly,
same.
slightly different. LA too, and Philadelphia. These are cities that they have slightly different structure on paper, but for all practical purposes, they are entities unto themselves. Yet not every single one of them is defined by this division the way St. Louis is. Baltimore is an interesting example. It's the only other truly independent major city besides St. Louis. The difference is the suburban Baltimore County that surrounds it has no incorporated municipalities. It's all just one county with just census designated places. None of them are incorporated, no mayors. It's just Baltimore County. Okay, so that maybe is something we can look at one day. But, you know, the people need to recognize, and this is another criticism I have of the CVC, the Explore St. Louis, they get their tax base from St. Louis City and St. Louis County hotels. So therefore, they're obligated to give equal weighting to those entities and to market the region and make sure that you give equal presentation to the city and the county, when the truth is, in reality, why should they earn equal representation? Nobody is thinking of Maryland Heights when you're going out of town to tout the things that we have. Nobody cares about Bridgeton. It's St. Louis, and St. Louis, the name is it represents the city, the urban core, the suburbs around it. The same story. No matter what city you go to, it's the city that is distinctive, not the suburbs.
You're making me think of a couple of different thoughts that I think are like cautiously optimistic, and kind of go back to the like, we have issues, but maybe see them as opportunities, and like that's where you can sell St. Louis, because you know we are a little unusual in how many people used to be in this city. Like we used to be a city of what, 800,000? And we're down to 300-ish thousand. So, you know, obviously that's a sign of white flight, that's a sign of problems, but there's also space, literal space and place for us to move back. And I am seeing, like going back to the point earlier about like us being this blue dot surrounded by red, I've also, and I wish I could cite my source, but I remember reading about how there is a trend among millennials and younger to do what I did, that grew up out in the hinterlands but are moving into the city and are choosing to kind of do things backwards from how their parents did, and are raising their children here and are investing. And I think that there's something there that kind of will hopefully solve all of them. Maybe not solve, but like put us in a positive direction towards those problems that you've very accurately put out about, like, you know, us not having the voting pool, you know, like I think as younger generations move in, like look at what Gen Z did to this midterm election. You know, I think that we're going to see more of that as younger generations come in and they're actively choosing to do things like move to St. Louis and not think of the racial dividing line like our parents did. Maybe that's optimistic of me, but I am seeing it. And I recently got a chance to speak to a bunch of high school juniors at MICDS. So a privileged school, but a very, you know, like interested in like include, like there was all different types of people. I was glad to see all different demographics there. And it really struck them when I said that like this is a place where you can actually make a difference. Like that's a reason to be here and to stay here. That seemed to really resonate with them, and that made me hopeful again that like they were into that. So I think that there's potential here for us to be going in the right direction and start like working towards some of the things that you pointed out.
Immigrants.
Yes.
There's no major city growing without an influx of immigrants, and we have to do everything possible to make this a hospitable place.
And thankfully, we have places like the International Institute that are really actively doing that. Like, that's why we have more Bosnians than anybody, like anywhere else outside of Bosnia. They're making an active recruitment for Afghan refugees now. So yeah, I think that that's, to Anthony's point, like there's not many cities that could take in 90,000 Bosnians, but we really needed it and it really helped us. So I definitely think that that's something that we should continue to be like really proud of and really focusing on. Yeah.
I agree, Jess. With young talent, we just kind of take that approach. Nobody, the Peace Corps doesn't have a division in Zurich. Where you want to move to where you're going to be needed and to kind of make that impact. So with a lot of our younger clients, we lovingly, not mock them, but just sort of say, why are you going to Denver and to the Nashvilles and to the markets where they've already popped, so to speak. Does Brooklyn really need you? Does it need your art or your dish or whatever it is that you're contributing? And they kind of think about it and go, yeah, I want to be a part of the growth at the ground level. And, are you going to really change hearts and minds in the Mission District of San Francisco? Like, you go to that bubble, dude. So when you kind of spin it another way, St. Louis still really is very punk rock. It is for the real hipster. It is, Nashville.
Randy, get on that.
Nashville is very distressed jeans, and St. Louis still has its authentic. It's real. That should be the marketing thing, is that St. Louis is still real. It's not a prairie pop-up. It is older, and it's got, when you sort of frame it as an opportunity, I do think for young people already going to, the hot spots, I do think it's going to be the Baltimores and the Detroits and the Clevelands and the St. Louis for this generation that is sort of the cool place to go. Not where everybody's already gone. So I totally agree, Jess. I see that if attracting young talent is something on the horizon for your young or budding company, I think St. Louis is actually sitting in a phenomenal position, even more so than some of the other ones we hear about all the time.
And real quick, I'm working in proximity with the Regional Arts Commission on their AEP 6. AEP 5 is already out, and I'm working with the Kransberg on the Sound Diplomacy Report, which is the first comprehensive report of music industry in St. Louis. And looking at the data, it's amazing. Like, our GDP for our music is higher than New York's. Theirs is like 1.3%. Ours is like 2%. We spend more money on arts than we do sports, like $500 million. The numbers exist, and you're looking at it. And some of the things you're seeing in these reports are like, St. Louis has everything it needs to be successful. Just figure out your politics and get that, and get your house in order, and you will be good to go. Underutilizing spaces, like driving through North City, I cannot name how many buildings that I see that I'm like, you can turn that into something, that can become something, Yeah. Oh.
Speculators.
Oh, we know all too well. Yeah, no. Yeah. Yeah. But I also have to be honest too. As a black person in St. Louis, it's hard to convince people that look like me to stay with the systemic, historic racism here. And for some people, it's easier to go to Dallas because the shit's ready made. It's ready to go. And I've had multiple conversations. Me and my friends are now to the age we're starting to make pay where we can actually buy property and do stuff. And I'm like, don't let your neighborhood go, because it's gonna be gone very soon. When you live in South City and see a house go on the market at 8 and it's off at 2 p.m., you know what time it is. Or when you look across the street and an apartment that looks similar to yours is on the market for almost $500,000 and somebody buys it, you know it's getting ready to happen. And I understand what you're saying. I'm with you 100%. But that's a deeper conversation of how do we create equity for people who look like me and immigrants and other folks to want to stay here and invest in this city when the state of Missouri makes it really hard. to want to live in a place like St. Louis, and with some of my friends, even Kansas City. This is not just isolated to St. Louis. So we have the infrastructure, we have the spaces. We have to really lean into making it equitable for everybody to want to be here and stay here.
Hey, you open up a can of worms.
Good conversation.
You know, just to add to it, one of the things that I experienced just kind of coming in, like being 22, it's like, thankfully St. Louis is like a lot of older people in the city that really care about, like, you know, you welcoming young people, but then that welcoming, there's like a tinge of like, I don't know if it's low self-esteem or like making sure that like you really, really like it, that it becomes sometimes overbearing to the point of like, yo, dang, like, I like it here. Why you, like, it's sometimes the people that are from here shit on the city more than the people that are moving here.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's like the most aggravating thing about living here is like, I see it as a great place. I just bought a downtown crib for $200,000. I'm sending it to all my friends back in Brooklyn, back in Charlotte, back in Atlanta, like, yo, look what I just got for 200 grand, where it's like, you can't even like afford anything like this in your city. But like the people, it's like the people, like my girlfriend's from here. Like every time I tell her like, oh, I'm so bullish on downtown St. Louis, she's like, yeah, you know? And it's like, I think that's one of the things that I would love to change about the city. It's just like the people that are from here, I would love to see the locals like really go hard for the city, particularly like, and I think a lot of people do, but like the folks that like are, the folks that are, a lot of folks that are relatively like, sometimes a lot of donors, it seems like there's a lot of people that have influence also are some of the biggest critics of the city, particularly to younger adults that actually want to build a career here. And it's like, dang, like if you don't seem bullish about your own city, then like why should I be bullish about the city? Thankfully, like, you know, I'm cheap, so I like the fact that I can buy something for, you know, pretty cheap. But like, you know, but it's like those things culturally. Like I just wish people like, you know, were, you know, go hard about the city, because like you bring up Charlotte, like Charlotte and all of its greatness wasn't that cool 15, 20 years ago. It had many of the same issues in regards to the downtown issues, in regards to the public school system issues. Some of the same things there. It just so happens that like a whole bunch of banks moved there, and now they have a massive influx of talent. And now Charlotte is like this great city that has this wonderful tax base, but it had some of the same issues that St. Louis did as any other city did. So I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to say, I just wish people just, you know, were a little more, you know, happy about this place. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask a question about that. Like, I'm from the Metro East, but I went to school in Nashville, moved to Austin, and I moved back. And I was circle back because I was an immigrant. We were young, saying we could buy a house here, which none of our friends can. So what are some strategies do you feel like that people that we could do to help change this mindset that we have in St. Louis? Because I feel it, and I think some people don't even realize the impact of what that does. That it's just so often common, but really it's just like, I don't know, strategies on how to start to address that.
I mean, this is light, but it's real. I go out to LA and see friends, and I flex affordability. I really do. Like, I'm like, oh, you spending $2,000 on a bathroom to stay in. I'm like, you know, and some of them are really having deep conversations about, do I want to continue? I can do the same thing I'm doing here at home now, because, you know, COVID made it where you can work remote in a lot of people's job profession. But for me, I'm like, you know, we know everything's going up because of inflation, recession, however you want to frame it. But I can afford to live here and travel and do things. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of my friends, they're becoming budget minded about how they want, because they're not just people who want to work all the time. They want to enjoy their leisure time as well. So for me, that's been a real strong conversation. It's just the affordability of it all and get into it before it becomes unaffordable. I think we got a while, but you know, yeah. So.
Crap, I lost my thought as soon as I grabbed the mic.
It'll come back.
Yeah. Randy, you want to say what you're going to say?
So instead of John Goodman and Jenna Fisher telling us they remember St. Louis fondly, perhaps we should have public service commercials where a psychologist is treating this very wide and
Right.
Yeah.
forget fluoride.
Right.
Let's medicate.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say now. So yeah, so I'm going to put I didn't mention this, but I'm also a media literacy professor. And so I'm going to switch hats and put my media literacy hat on real quick and say the same thing I tell my students when they feel like overwhelmed about the way that the media is these days. Like you can't control the outside message, but you can control how you process it and what you do with it yourself. So, like, we can't necessarily control all of the negativity. We can understand how that hits our ears and then start acting accordingly, knowing our critical thinking skills are in place instead of just absorbing those negative messages. So, I really think that there's just power in constantly proselytizing. However, if that's through affordability, maybe change the message a little bit depending on your audience. But yeah, like just telling the story and like remembering that like we don't suck, despite what you may be hearing from native St. Louisans or anybody else. The news that's only reporting crime or whatever. I really think that just championing St. Louis on your own goes a long way. Like that's where it starts. And just to like use a little example from years ago when I was trying to get the State Department, I was trying to talk the State Department into bringing a bunch of international visitors here instead of any of the other more well-known cities around. And I started off with like a blurb on why I love St. Louis in an authentic way, not just like rah. And I got the group, and the State Department officers told me that like I was the only one that like they could tell I loved my city. The other cities were like, oh, here's all our resources. And she was, the State Department officer was like, why would we bother going to your city if like you don't even love it yourself? Why are we going to send 20 people from around the world to prove that America isn't so bad if like that's your pitch? So I got them. I got those 20 people to come to St. Louis instead of LA or New York because I just showed my passion. So I think that that's where it starts, and that's what we have control over ourselves.
Apropos of that, I would like to see at least once a week on one of the morning shows a story about startups in town. I want to see the startup community seriously showcased. This is one of the best places in the country to start a business. The resources here are outstanding and really high quality, and we're pulling in startups from all over the place.
Write them and tell them
But
that.
we need to,
Yeah.
and some of it has to do with, we've got new staff at just about every one of the resources now. So somebody needs to light a little fire and say, it's the first week of the month, it's your job to pitch a story to KMOV. It's the second of the month, it's your job to pitch a story to KSDK. Just to start getting the pitches
We
out
pitch
there
a lot of
for
those
people to
stories,
get
but it
their
really
questions.
actually helps when you hear from viewers on what viewers want to see.
Yeah.
So honestly, like if that's something that you want, like if you start emailing them and saying like we've got this great, all
Yeah, I wanna
it's
hear about
pitched,
startups. I don't wanna
but they
hear about
don't
another
pick it up.
chiropractor opening a business.
Well, yeah. We're a little bit over time, so thank you all for making my job easy today. I appreciate it. I guess I'll kind of just leave it on like a really positive note. Just when you're selling St. Louis, like what are the things that like what's something that you sold about St. Louis that like really got somebody to buy in on being here?
I mean, I would say the power is really in your hands. I mean, we're waiting for all this big political stuff. You're going to be waiting for a long time. So, I have seen one happy person turn into 2, turn into 4, turn into 14, turn into 40, just like KWS that we mentioned earlier. But it doesn't have to be fancy. Every city has museums and parks. So I would say take them to that little taste of home, to your favorite coffee shop, to your favorite concert venue, just seeing it through you and all the things that you can enjoy. That's one thing that I really love about living here. They don't need your help to find the zoo and the arch and all of that, but making sure that they go in and find the little pockets in the neighborhoods, and that they'll know somebody, and that if they choose St. Louis, they'll have a friend here, they'll have an advocate here. I'm not I do think St. Louis is cheaper. Everywhere is getting more expensive, but one thing I do love to sell is the accessibility and the convenience. So I just left San Diego. I fell in love with the distillery there. Getting there, I'll never get back there when I'm in the San Diego traffic. I fell in love with a hot dog in DC. I'll never be able to get back there because it's so far. Whereas in St. Louis, if they love Cottleville or they love Lafayette Square, they'll be able to get there. And then seeing where you live and how you can sort of change a whole corner or a whole block or a whole neighborhood is really, really cool, that I think can help recruit the best and the brightest from around the world. Absolutely, for sure.
I have a story that's exactly that like goes back to what Jess said. You use sports, I used music. Like it would be a real easy sell. I'd have a group from around the world who doesn't know anything about St. Louis. I would take them to Beale, which doesn't exist anymore, but that's okay, to hear Kim Massey, R.I.P. But yeah, I used to do that regularly, and I specifically remember one group that was like the first night. I took them all out there. They had the best time of their lives. The interpreter kept saying, "Guys, you got in for $7. You need to understand, this cost you $7." And everybody is having the time of their life. And like after that, I could do no wrong. Like if a meeting wasn't good after that, it was fine. They didn't care because St. Louis was their favorite because they saw Kim Massey. So like it's just such a little thing. It seems so simple, but like that was just a little slice of like St. Louis that I personally love. I took the time to go show them that space myself, and that made all the difference. So.
I would think the biggest thing that's been selling people that I'm close to of coming back is just seeing my story. Like, I've made the most out of everything here. Like, I know Jess, she knows me well. I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to go get in that circle and make some change. And like 3 months later, I do it, And it's to your punk rock point. Like, people are accessible here. It doesn't take a lot to get a meeting with somebody and get a cup of coffee. And you'd be surprised at the conversations you have and the directions that you can go. And I don't think you can do that everywhere. You know what I mean?
Super quick comment. That's something that I've always said for like the last 10 years. Go to another city, email somebody and say, can I buy you a coffee and sit down with you? You're probably not going to get a response. Here, always a response, always coffee.
Yeah.
It's always been like, if I had to pick one single thing that's resonated with me, it's literally that.
Yeah. And I'm going to see you in Schnucks. I'm going to see you somewhere, so you can't hide. And I go everywhere in St. Louis, so.
That's why everybody answers, because they know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that as somebody who's driven to make change in my city, I love that. Like, it's literally 1 or 2 degrees of separation. Like, I can just scroll through my phone and figure it out, And I think that's something that a lot of people who are trying to make impacts in their areas, they don't always have access to. And it's helped cultivate my skills in everything I do, because I now have mentors across the spectrum that I can sit down with and say, help me think about this differently. Or, they're letting me know what's going on in the landscape. So I think being active and being seen and leaning into my work has done a lot to show others that they can do that here as well.
Y'all nailed it. I couldn't agree more. I think that it's like know your audience. So when I've got somebody coming into town too, are they looking for a suburban feel sort of thing where they want a lot of land? Well, I'm probably going to skip my favorite neighborhood in the city. I might drive by, like we might go get clementines there first or something just to expose them a little bit, but kind of know your audience. So, it's like if you've got guests in town or whatnot, like I'll take them to my favorite places or the things that resonate with me. But, if we're recruiting a company too, I had this couple from Israel and they fell in love with Lafayette Square and Creve Coeur. I'm like, great. You have all these options here. So I think that it is that authenticity. Every city where I've lived, I have found my coffee store, my bookshop, where I grocery shop, my mechanic. You take whatever your big city is, and you make it little. Introduce the people that you're bringing in to your little part of St. Louis of what makes it tick, and that makes it more authentic. And go down and buy them some swag at STL Style House.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for, being wonderful panelists. And thank you all for being wonderful crowd members and panelists in your own right. So appreciate it. All right.